A dawn in Hierapolis. The first light of dawn touches the white travertine terraces of Hierapolis, and the ancient city awakens like a jewel catching fire. Steam rises from the sacred hot springs, curling upward in gentle spirals that dance between the marble columns of temples and bathhouses. This is a place where gods are said to dwell, where healing waters flow freely from the earth itself, where pilgrims journey from across the Roman Empire seeking miracles. But miracles, you'll learn tonight, sometimes wear the most unexpected faces. I want you to breathe with me for a moment. Feel the warmth of those ancient springs. Smell the mineral-rich air that carried so many prayers skyward. This is Hierapolis, in what we now call Turkey, sometime in the 1st century of the Common Era. A city of wonder, yes. A city of beauty, absolutely. But also a city where human beings were bought and sold like pottery in the marketplace. It's here, in this contradiction between divine beauty and human cruelty, that our story begins. Here, where a boy named Epictetus learned the most profound truth about freedom, not despite his chains, but because of them. You see, dear listener, I know you've had those days when you feel bound by expectations that aren't your own, when other people's needs seem to matter more than your own breath, when you've smiled so long your face aches, and you can't remember the last time someone asked how you were feeling instead of what you were doing for them. Tonight, I want to tell you about a man who understood that feeling, who lived it in the most literal way possible, and who discovered something that no master could ever take away. The morning light spreads across Hierapolis now, illuminating the grand theater carved into the hillside. Soon actors will perform their dramas there. Stories of gods and heroes, of love and loss, of triumph and defeat. But the most important drama happening in this city isn't on any stage. It's happening in the modest quarters where the slaves live, where a young man with a damaged leg sits quietly, watching the sunrise and thinking thoughts that will echo through centuries. His name is Epictetus, and he belongs to someone else. Let that sink in for a moment. To belong to someone else, to have your time, your body, your very presence be considered property, to wake each morning knowing that your day will be shaped entirely by another person's will. And yet, this young man has discovered something extraordinary, something that his master, for all his wealth and power, may never understand. He's learned that there are things that cannot be owned, territories of the human spirit that remain sovereign no matter how heavy the chains. The slaves of Hierapolis rise early. They must. The day begins before dawn with the lighting of fires, the drawing of water, the preparation of meals for households that will wake expecting everything to be ready. Epictetus moves more slowly than the others. His leg was injured, some say by his master, others say by accident. The truth of it matters less than this. He has learned to work with what he has, not rage against what he's lost. This is where Stoicism begins, dear one. Not in the marble halls of philosophy schools, but in the simple recognition that we cannot control what happens to us, only how we respond to what happens to us. I wonder if you felt that truth in your own life, perhaps not in chains, but in other bindings, the job that demands more than you have to give, the relationships where you're always the one who bends, the endless list of should-dos that somehow never includes what you actually want to do. Epictetus understands. He's living it. As the sun climbs higher, the city comes fully alive. Merchants call out their wares in the agora. Children run between the columns, their laughter echoing off ancient stones. The wealthy recline by the healing pools, discussing politics and philosophy, while servants bring them wine and fruit. And in the midst of all this, in the spaces between tasks, Epictetus thinks. He thinks about the difference between what we can control and what we cannot. He thinks about the strange freedom that comes from accepting limitation. He thinks about how the mind can soar even when the body is bound, how the spirit can choose its own response even when the circumstances are chosen by others. These aren't abstract philosophical concepts to him. They're survival tools. They're the difference between despair and hope, between bitterness and peace, between feeling like a victim of life and feeling like a participant in something larger than any one person's cruelty or kindness. The healing waters of Hierapolis flow constantly, day and night, season after season. They've been flowing since before human memory. And they'll flow long after everyone currently living has returned to dust. There's something profound in that constancy, something that speaks to the deeper rhythms that govern all our lives. Epictetus has learned to align himself with those deeper rhythms, to stop fighting the current and start learning how to navigate it. This doesn't mean he's passive. Oh no. Passivity is just another form of being controlled by circumstances. What he's discovered is something far more radical, the active choice to focus his energy only on what actually belongs to him, his thoughts, his responses, his character, his inner freedom. Everything else, the master's moods, the day's demands, even his own physical limitations. These are part of the current. They're what is, and what is can be worked with, even when it cannot be changed. I want you to feel this with me tonight, dear listener. This sense of coming home to what actually belongs to you. Your breath belongs to you. Your attention in this moment belongs to you. The quality of kindness you bring to yourself, that belongs to you too. These are small things, perhaps, but Epictetus is learning that small things, fully owned, are infinitely more powerful than large things that we're always struggling to control. The afternoon heat builds in Hierapolis, and the pace of work slows slightly. Even slaves are allowed to rest when the sun is too fierce. Epictetus finds shade near the temple walls, the same walls where philosophers sometimes gather to debate the nature of virtue and happiness. He listens when he can, not openly. Slaves aren't supposed to be interested in such elevated matters, but wisdom has a way of flowing like those healing waters, finding its way into any vessel that's ready to receive it. And his vessel is ready. Oh, how ready it is. When you've been stripped of everything external, when you've had to rebuild your sense of self from the ground up, you develop an ear for truth that comfortable people often lack. The philosophers talk about virtue as if it's something to be achieved. Epictetus is learning that it's something to be practiced, daily, moment by moment, in the smallest choices and responses. It's not a destination, it's a way of walking. As evening approaches and the light begins to soften across the travertine terraces, something extraordinary is taking shape in the heart of this young slave, a philosophy, a way of being, the approach to life that will one day be taught in the greatest schools of the empire, but which is being born here, now, in the humblest of circumstances. Because wisdom, real wisdom, doesn't require perfect conditions. It requires only a willing heart and a mind ready to see clearly. The stars begin to appear above Hierapolis, the same stars that have watched over countless human dramas of suffering and transcendence. Tonight, they're witnessing the birth of something that will outlast empires, a way of understanding freedom that no external force can touch. And tomorrow, Epictetus will begin to teach others what he's learning, not with grand lectures, but with the quiet example of a man who has found peace in the most unlikely place. Diara on chains and choices in Rome. The journey from Hierapolis to Rome is not one Epictetus chooses. Few slaves ever do. The cartwheels turn steadily along the dusty roads, carrying him further from everything familiar, toward a destiny he cannot yet imagine. Rome in the 1st century is a city of impossible contrasts. Marble palaces rise beside cramped insulae where the poor huddle together. The Forum gleams with polished stone, while the Suburra reeks of human desperation. It's a place where a single man can own thousands of other human beings, and where ideas, somehow, still find ways to flourish. Epictetus arrives as property, a commodity to be catalogued and assigned, but the household he enters belongs to Epaphroditus, and this detail will change everything. Epaphroditus is no ordinary master. He serves in the imperial court, close to Emperor Nero himself, a freedman who has climbed the treacherous ladder of Roman politics through intelligence and careful maneuvering. His villa reflects his status. Rooms filled with scrolls, visiting intellectuals, heated debates that stretch late into the night. In most Roman households, a slave like Epictetus would be sent to the kitchens or the fields, but Epaphroditus notices something in the young man's eyes, a quality of attention, a way of listening that suggests depth beneath the surface. So Epictetus finds himself assigned to duties that keep him close to the heart of the household, organizing scrolls in the library, serving wine when philosophers gather to debate, standing quietly in corners while great minds wrestle with questions that have puzzled humanity for centuries. He learns to move like a shadow, present but invisible, necessary but unnoticed. It's a particular skill that slaves develop, the art of being simultaneously there and not there, of hearing everything while appearing to hear nothing. But Epictetus is hearing everything. The conversations wash over him night after night, discussions of virtue and vice, debates about what makes a life worth living, arguments about fate and free will that grow so passionate that grown men pace the marble floors like caged animals. At first, the Greek words feel foreign on his tongue when he practices them silently. Philosophy. Love of wisdom. Such a simple definition for something that seems to set these Romans on fire with enthusiasm. But gradually, he begins to understand that they're wrestling with the same questions that have haunted him since childhood. Why do we suffer? What can we control? How do we find peace in a world that seems designed to break us? One evening, as autumn settles over Rome, Epictetus overhears a conversation that stops him in his tracks. Two visitors are debating with Epaphroditus about the nature of freedom. "A man is free when he can do what he wishes," declares one, gesturing with his wine cup. "Nonsense," replies the other. "Freedom is having enough wealth to be independent of others' whims." But Epaphroditus shakes his head slowly. "I think you're both wrong. I've seen wealthy men who are slaves to their desires, and poor men who are slaves to their circumstances. True freedom." He pauses, considering his words carefully. True freedom might be something else entirely. From his position near the wall, Epictetus feels his heart quicken. This is the question that has tormented him. Can a slave ever be truly free? Or is freedom just a beautiful lie that free men tell themselves? The debate continues past midnight, but no satisfying answer emerges. The visitors eventually stumble home through Rome's dark streets, leaving Epictetus to clear the cups and snuff the oil lamps. But the question burns in his mind like a flame that refuses to die. Days pass, weeks. The routine of slave life continues, rising before dawn, attending to endless tasks, moving through the villa like a useful ghost. But now Epictetus carries something new inside him, a hunger for understanding that grows stronger each day. He begins to listen more carefully to the philosophical discussions, not just hearing the words, but trying to grasp the ideas beneath them. When he's alone in the library, organizing scrolls, he sometimes pauses to read a few lines. The Greek comes easier now, and gradually he recognizes names that recur in the debates. Socrates, who claimed to know nothing but somehow knew everything. Plato, who spoke of perfect forms beyond this imperfect world, Aristotle, who tried to categorize all of human experience. But it's another name that captures his attention, Zeno of Citium, the founder of something called Stoicism, a philosophy that promises not happiness, but something perhaps more valuable, tranquility, peace with what is, rather than endless yearning for what might be. The more Epictetus learns about Stoic ideas, the more they seem to speak directly to his condition. The Stoics teach that we cannot control external events, only our responses to them. They believe that virtue is the only true good, and that a wise person can be content even in the most difficult circumstances. For a slave, these ideas carry special weight. If happiness depends on external conditions, wealth, status, freedom, then people like Epictetus are doomed to misery. But if contentment can be found through inner discipline and right thinking, then perhaps even a slave can live well. It's a radical notion, revolutionary even. The idea that a man's worth isn't determined by his circumstances, but by his character. That wisdom and virtue are available to anyone, regardless of their position in society's hierarchy. Late at night, when the villa finally grows quiet, Epictetus practices what he's learning. He examines his thoughts the way a craftsman examines his tools. He notices his reactions to daily humiliations and asks himself, is this response helping me or harming me? Can I choose differently? The changes are subtle at first, a calmness in his movements, a steadiness in his gaze. When other slaves complain about their treatment, Epictetus finds himself responding differently, not with bitterness or resignation, but with a kind of philosophical curiosity. What did you expect? He might ask gently. We are slaves. Our masters will do as they please, but we can choose how we respond to their actions. We can choose what to make of this experience. Some of his fellow slaves think he's losing his mind. Others sense something different about him, a quality of peace that seems almost impossible given their circumstances. They begin to seek him out for advice, drawn by his unusual combination of acceptance and inner strength. Epictetus realizes he's becoming something he never expected, a teacher. Not in any formal sense, but in the way that people naturally turn to those who seem to have found answers to life's most pressing questions. And the questions keep coming. From slaves, certainly, but also from free servants and even occasional visitors who notice the unusual young man with the thoughtful eyes and measured words. Years pass in this way. Epictetus grows from a confused young slave into something rarer, a person who has found a way to be genuinely free while remaining physically bound. His reputation spreads quietly through Rome's intellectual circles. Even Epaphroditus begins to treat him less like property and more like a valued advisor. But the most important change is internal. Epictetus has discovered that the prison of slavery cannot touch the part of him that truly matters. His mind remains his own. His choices about how to think, how to respond, how to interpret events, these remain under his control. It's a hard-won wisdom earned through years of careful observation and disciplined thinking. And soon, very soon, he'll have the chance to share it with a world that desperately needs to hear it. The stars above Rome continue their ancient dance, indifferent to human suffering and triumph alike. But below, in a villa where a slave has learned to be free, something precious is taking shape, a teaching that will outlast empires, beginning in the most unlikely place imaginable. The seeds of wisdom, Musonius Rufus, that unlikely place, is about to become even more extraordinary. Because fate, it seems, has one more gift in store for our young philosopher. Word of Epictetus's quiet wisdom has begun to spread beyond the villa's walls. Slaves talk to freedmen. Freedmen whisper to citizens, and citizens, well, they sometimes find their way to the most unexpected teachers. It's on a crisp morning in early spring that everything changes. Epictetus is in the villa's garden, tending to his master's correspondence when a visitor arrives. Not the usual merchant or politician seeking Epaphroditus' favor, but a man whose very presence seems to shift the air itself. Musonius Rufus. Even Epictetus, confined as he is to the domestic sphere, knows that name, the great Stoic teacher, the philosopher who dared to speak truth to power and was exiled by Nero for his troubles. Recently returned to Rome, carrying with him the accumulated wisdom of years spent in contemplation and hardship. He's come to see Epaphroditus on some matter of business, but as he waits in the garden, something catches his attention. A slave, sitting quietly by the fountain, not in idleness, but in a posture of deep reflection. There's something in the young man's bearing that speaks of an inner stillness rare in any person, slave or free. "Tell me," Musonius says, approaching with the careful respect he shows to all human beings, regardless of their station, "what occupies your thoughts this morning?" Epictetus looks up, startled. He's accustomed to being invisible to visitors. But here is one of Rome's greatest minds addressing him as if his thoughts actually matter. "I was considering, sir, the nature of freedom," Epictetus replies carefully, "how it seems to have less to do with our circumstances than with our responses to them." Something flickers in Musonius's eyes, recognition perhaps, or hope. "And what have you concluded about this freedom?" "That most people," Epictetus says, growing bolder, "are slaves to things they cannot control, their fears, their desires, other people's opinions, while some who wear actual chains," he gestures to his own bound ankle, "might be the freest people in Rome." Musonius is quiet for a long moment. Then he smiles. The kind of smile a gardener might wear when discovering an unexpected flower blooming in rocky soil. "Would you like to explore these ideas further?" he asks. And just like that, everything changes. What follows are months of clandestine education. Musonius, officially in Rome on other business, begins making regular visits to Epaphroditus' villa, ostensibly for legal consultations, but increasingly, he finds reasons to linger in the garden, to engage the thoughtful slave in conversation. These aren't formal lessons. They can't be. A slave studying philosophy? The very idea would be scandalous to most Romans. But wisdom, true wisdom, has never cared much about social conventions. Instead, they walk, they talk. Musonius poses questions that unlock doors in Epictetus's mind he didn't even know existed. "Tell me about virtue," Musonius says one afternoon as they pace between the olive trees. "Virtue is—" Epictetus pauses, searching for words. "The one thing that belongs completely to us. Our courage, our justice, our wisdom, our self-discipline. External things can be taken away. But how we choose to respond, that remains ours. And if someone insults you, they can only insult my reputation, not my character. My character is built by my choices, not their words. And if someone takes your possessions, they take objects, not my ability to be content. They might even be doing me a favor, freeing me from the burden of attachment." Musonius nods approvingly. This young man isn't just memorizing concepts, he's living them, testing them against the reality of his own constrained existence. The Stoics speak of preferred indifference, Musonius explains during another session. Health over sickness, freedom over slavery, wealth over poverty. These things are naturally preferable, but they don't determine our happiness. A sick person can be virtuous. A slave can be wise. A poor person can be content. Because virtue is the only true good, Epictetus responds, the understanding dawning in his voice. Everything else is just material for practicing virtue. Exactly. Your slavery isn't a barrier to wisdom, it's a gymnasium for developing it. And what wisdom it is. Week by week, conversation by conversation, Musonius shares the accumulated insights of centuries. The teachings of Zeno and Chrysippus, refined by Seneca and Cato, now passed down to this unlikely student in a Roman garden. The discipline of desire, learning to want what happens rather than demanding that what we want should happen. The discipline of action, acting with justice and kindness, regardless of how others treat us. The discipline of assent, examining our judgments, questioning our assumptions, refusing to be enslaved by false beliefs about what will make us happy. Most people, Musonius explains, live as if they're at the mercy of external events, as if their peace of mind depends on things going their way. But the Stoic understands that we live in our judgments about events, not in the events themselves. So when someone treats me poorly, they're giving you information about their character, not yours. Your response. That's where your character lives. It's revolutionary thinking, not because it's complex, but because it's so beautifully simple, so immediately applicable to any life, in any circumstances. Epictetus drinks it in like a man discovering water in the desert. These aren't abstract philosophical concepts to him. They're tools for daily living, practical wisdom for navigating a world that offers him few external freedoms but cannot touch his inner sovereignty. Remember, Musonius tells him during one of their final sessions before the teacher must return to his own duties, you are not your body, not your possessions, not your reputation. You are your capacity to choose. That capacity is divine. It cannot be enslaved. Even if my body remains bound, especially then, you'll be living proof that freedom is an inside job. As autumn arrives and Musonius's visits become less frequent, Epictetus finds himself changed in ways both subtle and profound. The Stoic principles haven't made his external circumstances easier. He's still a slave. His leg still pains him. He still faces the daily indignities and uncertainties of his position. But something fundamental has shifted. Where once he endured his situation with quiet resignation, now he engages with it as a philosopher. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to practice virtue. Every setback becomes a chance to demonstrate that his peace doesn't depend on external approval. The other slaves notice there's something different about Epictetus now, a quality of presence that draws people to him. Not the desperate charisma of someone trying to escape their circumstances, but the quiet magnetism of someone who has found something unshakable within themselves. How do you stay so calm? A fellow slave asks after a particularly harsh day. I remember what's mine and what isn't, Epictetus replies simply. My master owns my labor, not my thoughts. He can command my actions, but not my character. The part of me that matters most, that belongs only to me. It's a seed of wisdom that will soon grow into something magnificent, because Epictetus is beginning to understand that he has something precious to offer, not despite his circumstances, but because of them. The greatest teachers, after all, are often those who have learned their lessons in the hardest schools. Banished from Rome. Years pass like pages turning in an ancient scroll. Epictetus grows from student to teacher, from follower to philosopher in his own right. The garden conversations with Musonius Rufus have planted seeds that now bloom into a wisdom all his own. He speaks to growing circles of listeners, slaves and citizens alike drawn to his quiet certainty about what truly matters. But Rome is changing. The city that once welcomed philosophical discourse now watches it with suspicious eyes. Emperor Domitian sits on the throne, and his paranoia casts long shadows through every corner of the empire. Philosophers, he believes, breed dangerous thoughts. They question authority, encourage people to think for themselves. They speak of virtue and wisdom as if these things matter more than imperial power. This cannot be allowed. The decree comes on a morning when autumn light slants golden through the forum. All philosophers must leave Rome, not tomorrow, not next week, now. Epictetus receives the news with the same calm he's cultivated through years of bondage and freedom alike. He's no longer a slave. Epaphroditus freed him some time ago, recognizing perhaps that you cannot truly own a mind that has already liberated itself. But freedom, Epictetus has learned, is not about where you live. It's about how you live. "Will you fight this?" asks Marcus, one of his students, anger flashing in his young eyes. "Surely there are ways to appeal, to stay." Epictetus shakes his head gently. "Tell me, my friend, what would I be fighting? The emperor's fear? The winds of political change? These things are not up to me." He gathers his few possessions, a worn cloak, some scrolls, the walking stick that helps support his damaged leg. Everything that matters, he realizes, he carries within himself. The years of study, the conversations with Musonius, the insights born from suffering and observation, these cannot be taken by any decree. "But your students," Marcus persists, "your work here." "Will continue," Epictetus says with quiet confidence. "Truth doesn't belong to Rome. It travels wherever it needs to go." The journey north to Nicopolis takes weeks. Epictetus travels with other exiled philosophers, a small caravan of displaced wisdom makers. Some rage against their fate, others sink into despair. But Epictetus walks with steady steps, his mind already turning toward what comes next. He thinks of a story Musonius once told him, about a river that encounters a mountain. The river doesn't waste energy cursing the obstacle. It simply finds another way, carving new channels, discovering new landscapes. Water always reaches where it needs to go. The road winds through hills dotted with olive groves and small villages where life continues its ancient rhythms. Children play in dusty squares. Women draw water from wells their grandmothers used. Farmers tend crops that will feed families through another winter. This is the real Rome, Epictetus realizes, not the marble and gold of the capital, but the quiet persistence of ordinary people doing what they can with what they have, living their small freedoms, making their daily choices. At night, around the campfire, his fellow exiles ask him how he remains so calm. "I'm practicing," he tells them simply. "Practicing what?" "The discipline of desire," he says, watching flames dance against the darkness, wanting what happens instead of demanding that what I want should happen. One of the philosophers, a man named Apollodorus, shakes his head. "That sounds like giving up." "Does it?" Epictetus pokes at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. A sailor doesn't give up when the wind changes. He adjusts his sails. He works with what is, not with what he wishes were. The sparks rise and disappear into the vast night sky, each one brief but beautiful, part of something larger than itself. "We are being given a gift," Epictetus continues, "the chance to test what we've learned, to see if our philosophy works not just in comfortable gardens, but on hard roads, in uncertainty, in exile. Nicopolis, when they finally reach it, is smaller than Rome, quieter, a Greek city that still remembers its ancient love of learning. Here, Epictetus realizes, he can do something he never could in the capital's crowded streets. He can build something lasting. He finds a simple house near the city's edge, nothing grand, just space enough for living and thinking and teaching. The rooms are small but filled with light. There's a courtyard where students can gather, a study where he can work on the ideas that have been growing in his mind like seeds, waiting for the right soil. This exile, he begins to understand, is not punishment. It's opportunity. In Rome, he was one voice among many, competing with the noise and distraction of empire. Here, he can speak more clearly, be heard more fully. Students begin to arrive, not just from Nicopolis, but from across the Greek world. Young men hungry for wisdom that works in the real world. Philosophy that doesn't just sound beautiful, but actually helps you live. What is the first business of philosophy? He asks his new students on their first morning together. They offer various answers: truth, wisdom, virtue. To get rid of self-conceit, he tells them, for it is impossible for anyone to begin to learn what he thinks he already knows. The morning sun streams through the courtyard, warming the stone benches where his students sit. Some take notes on wax tablets, others simply listen, letting the words settle into their minds like seeds, finding fertile ground. This is how wisdom spreads, Epictetus thinks, not through grand proclamations or imperial decrees, but through quiet conversations, one mind touching another, one heart learning to see clearly, then helping another do the same. We were born to work together, he continues, his voice carrying easily in the still air. Even those who work against us, they give us opportunities to practice patience, forgiveness, understanding. Everyone is our teacher if we know how to look. A student raises his hand. But master, what about injustice? What about cruelty? Should we simply accept these things? Epictetus nods approvingly. Good questions deserve careful answers. We fight injustice, he says, but we fight it from the right place, from inner strength, not inner turmoil, from love of what's good, not hatred of what's bad. The quality of our actions matters as much as the actions themselves. The afternoon passes in discussion, in questions and answers that spiral deeper into the heart of what it means to live well. When evening comes, Epictetus walks alone through the city streets, his walking stick tapping gently on the ancient stones. The sun sets behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Somewhere to the south, Rome continues its complicated dance of power and politics. But here, in this quieter place, something different is growing. Wisdom that will outlast emperors. Truth that no decree can exile. Ideas that will travel further than any army, carried not by force, but by the simple power of helping people live better lives. Epictetus pauses at the city's edge, looking out over the landscape that is now his home. Tomorrow there will be more students, more questions, more opportunities to plant seeds of understanding. Tonight, there is simply gratitude for the winding road that brought him here, for the exile that became an invitation, for the chance to turn loss into gift. The first stars appear in the darkening sky, each one finding its place in the vast pattern of night. A school in Nicopolis. The morning light finds Epictetus walking through the olive groves that surround his simple dwelling in Nicopolis. The trees are ancient here, their twisted trunks speaking of seasons weathered and storms survived. He moves slowly, deliberately, his walking stick marking a gentle rhythm against the stone path. This is where he has chosen to build something lasting. The school that grows around him is unlike any other in the Greek world. There are no marble columns or elaborate courtyards, no libraries filled with precious scrolls, or dining halls where wealthy patrons gather to debate. Instead, there is something far more precious, the sound of genuine inquiry, of minds opening to new possibilities. Students come from across the Mediterranean. Some are young Romans seeking wisdom beyond what their tutors can provide. Others are merchants who have heard whispers of a teacher who speaks differently about success and failure. A few are women who attend the public lectures, hungry for philosophy that addresses the real challenges of daily life. They find Epictetus sitting beneath a simple portico, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. His teachings are practical, immediate, rooted not in abstract theory, but in the lived experience of someone who has known both slavery and freedom, both suffering and peace. What disturbs people, he tells them, is not what happens to them, but their judgment about what happens. The words settle into the quiet morning like seeds finding fertile ground. A young man raises his hand, his face troubled. He speaks of family expectations, of pressure to pursue a career that feels like another form of bondage. Epictetus listens with the attention of someone who has learned that every question contains its own wisdom. "You speak as if you have no choice," Epictetus responds gently, "but notice, you are choosing even now. You are choosing to be disturbed by their expectations rather than examining what you truly value." The student's expression shifts, confusion giving way to something like recognition. This is how change happens in Nicopolis, not through dramatic revelations but through small adjustments in perspective, like a sailor making tiny corrections that eventually alter the entire course of a journey. The school operates on principles as simple as they are revolutionary. Students pay what they can afford. Those who cannot pay with money contribute through service, helping with meals, maintaining the grounds, copying texts for others to study. Epictetus himself lives modestly, owning little beyond his walking stick and a simple iron lamp that lights his evening reflections. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, he reminds them, but in having few wants. His own life embodies this teaching. His breakfast is bread and olives. His clothing is plain wool, mended when necessary. His greatest luxury is the time to think deeply, to observe the patterns of human suffering and joy, to understand what truly matters. The afternoons bring private conversations. A woman struggling with the death of her child, a merchant facing financial ruin, a young philosopher wrestling with doubt about his calling. Epictetus receives each story with the same careful attention, finding in each person's struggle a universal truth about the human condition. "We suffer more in imagination than in reality," he tells the worried merchant. "Your business may fail, but you are not your business. Your reputation may suffer, but you are not your reputation. What remains when all of that falls away?" The merchant looks puzzled at first. Then something in his shoulders relaxes, as if he has been carrying a weight he didn't realize he could set down. Word of the school spreads not through grand announcements, but through the transformed lives of those who study here. Former students return to their cities carrying something different in their bearing, a quality of inner stillness that others notice and want to understand. Some become teachers themselves, adapting Epictetus's methods to their own circumstances. A Roman senator begins holding small gatherings where he shares Stoic principles with other leaders. A Greek physician incorporates the teachings into his healing practice, understanding that many ailments begin in the mind's relationship to circumstance. The influence spreads like ripples on still water. Quiet, persistent, reaching places Epictetus himself will never see. In the evenings, he often sits alone in his small garden, reflecting on the day's conversations. The iron lamp casts a warm circle of light as he considers the questions his students have brought him. Some he has answered well. Others require more thought, more careful attention to the subtle ways that wisdom must be adapted to individual circumstances. He thinks of Musonius Rufus, his teacher in Rome, and wonders if the old philosopher could have imagined this outcome, that the slave who once listened secretly in garden corners would one day guide others toward the same freedom he had found. The irony is not lost on him. In Rome, surrounded by power and wealth, he had been constrained by his circumstances. Here in exile, with nothing but his thoughts and his voice, he has found a way to touch lives across the known world. This is perhaps the deepest Stoic truth of all, that our greatest limitations often become our most profound opportunities if we have the wisdom to see them clearly. A gentle breeze moves through the olive trees, carrying the scent of wild herbs and the distant sound of waves against the shore. Nicopolis sleeps peacefully around him, but the ideas being born here will travel far beyond these quiet hills. Tomorrow will bring new students, new questions, new opportunities to plant understanding in fertile minds. Tonight there is simply the satisfaction of work well done, and the deep contentment that comes from knowing that exile has become invitation, that loss has transformed into lasting gift. The lamp flame flickers gently in the evening air, steady and bright. The enduring legacy. Years pass like gentle seasons in Nicopolis, and among the many students who come to learn at Epictetus's feet, one young man arrives with a particular gift. His name is Arian, and he carries with him not just curiosity about philosophy, but something far more precious: the careful hand of a devoted scribe. Arian settles into the rhythm of the school quickly. Each morning he takes his place among the other students in the simple courtyard where Epictetus teaches. But while others focus solely on absorbing the wisdom being shared, Arian does something different, something that will echo through centuries, yet unborn. He writes, not formal treatises or elaborate philosophical arguments, but the actual words of his teacher, the real conversations, the spontaneous responses to genuine questions, the way Epictetus pauses mid-sentence to help a struggling student understand, the gentle laughter that follows a particularly apt metaphor. You are like someone standing at a crossroads, Epictetus tells a worried young man one afternoon, crying because you cannot take both paths at once. Choose your direction and walk with confidence. Arian's stylus moves quickly across his wax tablet, capturing not just the words but the warmth behind them. He understands something profound, that this wisdom is too valuable to trust to memory alone, too important to let fade with time. Day after day, season after season, Arian continues his quiet work. He records the discussions about desire and aversion, the teachings on what we can and cannot control, the patient explanations of how to find peace in an uncertain world. His tablets fill with conversations about freedom and slavery, about responding to insult with dignity, about finding joy in simple acceptance of what is. Remember, Epictetus often says, you are an actor in a play. Your job is not to choose your role, but to play it well, whatever it may be. And Arian writes it down, preserving not just the teaching, but the context, the way these words comfort the grieving, the way they strengthen the discouraged, the way they transform ordinary students into people of extraordinary inner resilience. Epictetus himself seems almost unaware of this careful documentation. He teaches as he always has, responding to the moment, addressing the need before him, speaking truth with the simplicity that has always marked his approach. But Arian sees further. He sees how these moments of teaching contain universal wisdom, timeless guidance that could help not just today's students, but generations yet to come. In the evenings, Arian carefully transfers his notes to papyrus, organizing the teachings, preserving the conversations, creating something lasting from these daily interactions. He doesn't yet know that he is crafting what will become the discourses. One of the most important philosophical works ever written. He only knows that this wisdom must not be lost. Sometimes students ask him why he writes so diligently. We're here to learn philosophy, they say, not to become scribes. But Arian understands something they don't yet see. Learning philosophy is indeed important. But preserving it? That's a form of service to humanity itself. Every conversation he records is a gift to future seekers. Every teaching he preserves is a light that will continue shining long after the lamp in Epictetus's study has gone dark. The work is painstaking, requiring him to balance the role of student with the responsibility of recorder. He must listen deeply enough to understand, while maintaining enough detachment to capture accurately. He must be present in the moment, while thinking of readers he will never meet. Gradually, other students begin to appreciate what Arian is doing. They start speaking more slowly when Epictetus shares something particularly profound, giving him time to write. They help him remember details when his attention was focused on his tablets rather than the full scene. The entire school becomes, in small ways, part of the preservation effort. Years accumulate, and so do Arrian's careful records. The conversations about handling difficult people, the discussions of how to respond to loss, the gentle guidance on finding contentment with what life offers, all of it preserved in his clear, faithful prose. He begins to see patterns in the teachings, core principles that appear again and again, applied to different situations, but always pointing toward the same fundamental truths: the primacy of virtue over external goods, the importance of accepting what we cannot change while taking full responsibility for what we can, the path to genuine freedom through inner discipline rather than external circumstances. These patterns help him organize the material, creating what will eventually become the Enchiridion, a handbook of essential Stoic principles drawn from years of recorded conversations, practical wisdom distilled into its most accessible form, guidance that any seeker can carry and apply. But perhaps most importantly, Arrian captures something beyond just the philosophical content. He preserves the humanity of it all, the way Epictetus treats each student as an individual, the patience with which he explains difficult concepts, the humor he brings to serious subjects, the warmth that makes even challenging truths feel like gifts rather than burdens. Through Arrian's faithful work, future generations will not just learn Stoic philosophy. They will meet Epictetus himself. They will sit in that courtyard in Nicopolis, listen to that gentle voice, and discover that wisdom, when shared with love, becomes something far more powerful than mere knowledge. The lamp burns late in Arrian's quarters as he works, transferring the day's teachings to permanent form. Outside, Nicopolis settles into peaceful sleep. But here, in these quiet hours of careful writing, immortality takes shape one word at a time. Finding peace within. The seasons turn in Nicopolis, and with them, the inevitable passage of time touches even the wisest among us. Epictetus grows older. His body, once strong despite its early trials, begins to show the gentle wear that comes to all who walk this earth long enough. But his spirit remains as luminous as ever, perhaps even brighter for having been polished by so many years of practice. His students notice the changes first, the way he moves more slowly through the courtyard, how he sometimes pauses longer between thoughts, not from confusion, but from the deep consideration that comes with age. They gather more closely now when he speaks, sensing perhaps that each conversation is more precious than the last. "Remember," he tells them one afternoon as the Mediterranean sun slants golden through the olive trees, "what we practice here is not preparation for death, but preparation for life. Every moment we choose virtue over vice, every time we accept what we cannot change and act on what we can, we are already living the good life. Death is simply the completion of that practice." The young faces around him listen with the intensity of those who sense they are receiving something irreplaceable. Arrian, now graying himself, continues his faithful recording, his stylus moving across the wax tablet with the rhythm of devotion. He has learned that wisdom is not diminished by repetition, but deepened by it. "You ask me about fear," Epictetus continues, his voice still gentle but carrying the weight of decades. "Fear of loss, fear of change, fear of death itself. But what if I told you that the very thing you fear losing was never truly yours to begin with? Your reputation, your possessions, even this body I inhabit, these are all on loan from the universe. The only thing that truly belongs to you, the only thing that cannot be taken, is how you choose to respond to whatever comes." A student shifts uncomfortably, perhaps thinking of loved ones, of dreams that might not unfold as planned. Epictetus sees this, as he has always seen the unspoken struggles of those who come seeking wisdom. This does not mean we love less deeply, he says softly. It means we love more freely, without the desperate clinging that turns affection into suffering. When we truly understand that everything is temporary, we can appreciate each moment for what it is, a gift, not a guarantee. The months pass like pages turning in Arian's careful manuscripts, each day bringing new conversations, new insights, new opportunities to practice the art of living well. Epictetus continues teaching until his final days, not because he must, but because this is who he has chosen to be, a teacher, a guide, a living example of the freedom that comes from within. When the time comes, it comes as naturally as sunset after a full day. Epictetus faces his own ending with the same calm acceptance he has taught others to bring to every challenge. His last words to his gathered students are simple, practical, perfectly him. Remember, you are an actor in a play. Play your part well, whatever part it may be. And then, peace. The kind of peace that comes not from the absence of struggle, but from the presence of acceptance. The peace that Epictetus discovered first as a young slave in Hierapolis, cultivated through years of practice, and now offers as his final gift to a world that so desperately needs to remember what true freedom looks like. But death is not the end of this story. How could it be, when the very essence of what Epictetus taught transcends the boundaries of any single life? In the scrolls and tablets that Arian has so carefully preserved, in the students who carry these teachings to distant lands, in every person who discovers that they have the power to choose their response to whatever life brings. Epictetus continues to teach. His voice echoes through the centuries, reaching across time to touch hearts that have not yet been born, offering the same gentle guidance he gave to those who sat in his courtyard in Nicopolis. You are more powerful than you know, that voice whispers, not powerful over others, not powerful over circumstances, but powerful over yourself. And that is the only power that truly matters. The lamp that once burned late in Arian's quarters now burns in countless other places. Wherever someone seeks to understand the difference between what they can control and what they cannot. Wherever someone chooses virtue over convenience. Wherever someone finds the courage to accept what is while working toward what could be. Tonight, as you settle into rest, you carry that same lamp within you, the flame of wisdom that no external circumstance can extinguish. The light of understanding that transforms every challenge into an opportunity for growth. The gentle glow of acceptance that brings peace, not by changing the world around you, but by changing how you meet that world. With grace, with wisdom, with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you are and what truly matters, letting that knowledge settle deep into your bones as sleep comes softly, carrying you into dreams where ancient wisdom and present peace flow together like streams meeting the eternal sea.